Hi, everyone, and welcome to Threat Response in the Cloud, balancing between speed and control. Today's webinar is sponsored by Stream.Security and produced by SmartBrief. My name is Keith Ward, and I'm a moderator with SmartBrief. We are a future B2B company, and I am thrilled to be here today. Now, this is going to be an awesome event, and I need to start out by covering a few housekeeping items to help you get the most out of this webinar. And we are going to start today over there in the chat tab on the far right side of your screen. This is where we hang out, get to know each other, and talk while this event is going on. You can try it out right now. A bunch of you have already done that. Say hi, send some emojis, let us know where you're logging in from, how you're doing, what the weather's like, whatever you want. Any kind of that information is a lot of fun, and we love to know all about you. So keep that going. I see John from California, Robert. I see Michael from Pittsburgh, another Robert from Maryland, my neck of the woods. Enrique from Brazil. I see Wolfgang from Munich. I love that name. Adam from Atlanta. Tim is here. Andrew from California. Daniel from Denver. Gilbert from South Carolina. Jorge from Texas. All over the place. Love seeing everybody here today. Thank you. And let's keep that going. Tell us all where you are. Now, that chat is also the place to get help with any technical issues that you might have during the session. So if you can't hear something, can't see something, if something goes sideways, first thing you want to do is a browser refresh or two. That usually flushes out those tech gremlins. If they still hang around, though, let us know in the chat, and me or my spectacular colleague Riley will hop on there and help you out. So let us know in chat if you're having any issues. Now, the absolute best way to dive into the information and insight that we're going to be exploring today is by asking questions. So take 2 hops over from that chat tab into the Q&A tab so you know where that is. Now, Q&A is where you go if you've got a specific question for our presenter today, anything you want to know. So that is more just to ask questions over in the Q&A. Chat is reserved more for just hanging out and talking amongst ourselves. So we kind of like to keep those separate, makes things a little more efficient. So just, keep that in mind. We will always do our best to get to as many questions as we can over chat today. There's a lot of info to cover, however. So if we don't get to all the questions, have no fear. We're going to send all of these questions on to Stream.Security after we wrap today, and you will get an answer via email. So now with that, we're going to go to our last little tab there. Right in the middle is the Docs tab. We have got some exciting content to go along with the webinar. Click around in the Docs section and you can explore. There's some great ATM content, great content from, especially from Stream.Security today. A bunch of free great handouts, and I'm going to go into some detail on those later on. And it is not just the awesome content you're going to get today. One of you is going to get $250 richer, courtesy of an Amazon gift card that I am going to be handing out at the end of the event today. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize. So look over that, over what you got in the docs, chat, Q&A. There's all kinds of ways to interact with us today, and we want you to take advantage. Finally, on our little tour of the interface here, you can set the language and the closed captioning. They're both available in the lower right-hand part of your screen. If you need those functions, many languages available, and the closed captioning works really well. So please do take advantage of that. And with that, folks, it's time to stop listening to me babbling and get to the main event. I am so excited to introduce you to our expert speaker today, and that is Jason Nations. Jason, let's bring you on here. All right. Hey, there you are. Jason, so good to see you today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. Jason, this is your bailiwick, as the old timers say. So I am going to turn this over to you. I will see you on the other side for some fantastic Q&A. In the meantime, you have the mic, sir.
All right. Thanks very much. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Looks like we got a fairly big crowd, so thanks a lot, and glad to have you. Quick, just a couple things about myself. So my name is Jason Nations. I spent the last 15 years or so at an electric utility. The last 8, I was the chief security officer, and have transitioned, I guess, to the dark side, if you want to say that. I'm now working for a product, and I was a customer of Stream before I came over to start working for us now. And I would say just a couple things about myself is that I'm really passionate about tackling hard things. I'd love to work in the security space. I think it's really important, pretty great. And I talk kind of fast, so feel like I should give you that preference so you have that sort of preface, so you have that now and you know, and at least you won't be able to say I didn't warn you. So we'll kind of run through some slides. My intention is not to give you death by PowerPoint. If you've got a question, feel free to call that out. I'll do my very best to see those and to pay attention. And if we can get them while we're talking through these slides, fantastic. If not, maybe we'll get them at the end. And then as Keith said, either way, we'll get you an answer one way or the other. So let's kind of move on. So I would start with saying the kind of first thing is that there is no such thing as a fair fight. We can go all the way back to Sun Tzu if we want to think about that, and we want to think about how he always talked about preparing the battle space and making sure that you are able to be victorious in any sort of fight scenario before you ever get there. And so that's really what we're thinking about. And I guess the idea that I have here is that I want you to see is, does anybody recognize, and maybe this is a great way for us to be able to interact a little bit. Does anybody recognize these shoes? And for some reason or another, hang on one second. I am not seeing part of my slides on my screen. And so, hey, Riley, I'm not seeing my notes. I don't know where they are. And I need that because I don't know the name of these Nike shoes off the top of my head. So I'm going to show you these. We're going to just keep going. So what I would show is, what I'd tell you there is that these are different Nike shoes, and when we say no fair fight, no such thing as a fair fight. So Nike, a few years ago, you may remember, just before the Olympics in Tokyo, came out with a series of different types of shoe that had different soles and different attachments to them. And these different soles and attachments enabled the runner to go really fast. And so at one point, the guys that were doing this and using them over a 2-day period, there were 2 major records broken with marathons because the runners were wearing one of these new shoes. And so if you weren't a Nike endorsee, all of a sudden you very likely could finish. Yeah, I see an Alpha Fly. That is one of them. Yeah. If you weren't a Nike endorsee, suddenly you're potentially running against a person that is going to have some type of advantage over you that you are not going to be able to. You're going to be at a deficit right away, which is going to be a trouble for you. And so, like, why would you want to run in a race that you know you can't possibly win? And so, what happened with this situation is that the runners here went crazy, and a bunch of people went to the International Track and Field Federation, and they said, "Hey, we got to do this." And so they actually banned all of these shoes. But the idea that you want to try to have as many advantages as you have or can in a fight is really important. And look, whether we care to admit it or not, as a security professional, we're in a bit of a war. That there are people out there, sort of in the ether, that are going to want to potentially do things to impact our organization's ability to operate. And I came from a utility, an electric utility, and so that, there are certainly threat actors out there who would like to, be able to impact the bulk electric system or the electric grid. And if we think about how important electricity was, it was a big deal to us. And fortunately, our government takes that very seriously, and the utility industry takes that very seriously. But we were very clear, and it was very important to us to make sure that we were prepared to be able to do that. And so I mentioned Sun Tzu earlier. If we go back to Sun Tzu, he talks a lot about preparing the battle space, right? In the high, quick Jason version of this, right? It was a bunch of advice to be able to help you. And that's Sun Tzu, The Art of War. If you haven't read that, I don't know if you knew you were going to get that in the webinar today, but here you go. So Sun Tzu talks about preparing the battle space. Everything in the summary would say, if you don't know where your enemy is, don't fight. If your position isn't fortified to guarantee victory, don't fight. If you don't know you can win, don't fight. That sort of stuff. As a defender, we have to prepare our battle space. We got to know our assets. It's imperative that we have the right level of visibility. We should know where our gaps are. And the truth is, too, is that we should be looking for kind of real-time situational awareness over any sort of kind of human experience, gut-based, this is what's going to happen. So if we can use a tool as a force multiplier to make us better, to make our teams better, to make us be in a better position, well, then that's a huge positive for us. And that's what we're going to talk about a good bit today. So I apologize. This may be a little bit of an eye chart for you, but I think you could zoom it in. So we've got this paradox when we think about our SOCs. And these are generalizations. These are some from my experience and may not be the case everywhere, but I think they're fairly well accurate. So just start off by thinking about a couple things, right? Our SOC is often the first to be notified, right? Like they're the ones that are generally 24/7, or they're the guys with the pagers or the gals with the pagers, whomever that is. The question I would ask, though, is are they always the best equipped to respond? And if we think about who makes up our SOC, right? So sometimes our less senior security analysts are in our SOC teams, not because they're not great and not because they're not going to be amazing at some point, but because that's a very good entry point in a lot of organizations to be able to bring someone in and grow their skills in their knowledge base, and then to be able to turn them into the sort of super unicorn ninja pirate security analyst that we all hope and want them to be. But if you're newer, then that sometimes can also be a problem a little bit, right? And if we think about too, how does the SOC team really understand the implications of an event or an incident that's going on, right? And so if we're a SOC person and right, we're kind of short on tenure, that may mean that we don't know where all the dead bodies are buried, like in the organization, right? That we may not know the full architecture. We may not understand lots of security tools. We may be very, very smart, but if we don't know the architecture, if we don't know all the applications, we may not know the players, we may not know who to call. It's important for us to sort of have a programmatic approach to be able to help and equip and enable those, so we're preparing our battle space so that an event occurs and the members of our SOC are able to contextualize and understand as best possible what that means, and then be able to get to the right space to be able to respond, right? That we wouldn't want to call animal control if our house is on fire. We'd want to call the fire department. If we have a raccoon in our front yard that's eating our trash, maybe we call animal control. But if our house is on fire, we want to call the fire department. If we don't know what's going on in our SOC, then we may call the wrong resource. We may respond badly. We may not call the fire department. We should have called the police department. It just depends. And this chart that is on the right, if you think about this too, when we think about our cloud environments, if we're multi-cloud, so I've got, in this example, right, you can see a little bit of AWS, you can see a little bit of Azure. If I've got both of those, well, is my SOC analyst clear on all of the company's Azure and AWS resources? Does my SOC analyst fully understand the differences between the two? Does my SOC analyst fully understand how the connectivity works and the implications of moves they may make if there's a need to do some sort of remediation if we detect something that's bad? And then I would juxtapose this picture with the historical Visio diagrams that we've had of networks for our legacy on-prem and just on-prem networks, that sort of stuff, right? We have Visio diagrams, but one of the negatives of a Visio diagram is that the second it's saved and shipped off and delivered to somebody else, it potentially becomes obsolete because that stuff changes. And in a cloud environment, especially where they're meant to be dynamic, where we can scale up and down, we can add resources, we could add compute, we could add different assets, we could add identities, we could add virtual network interfaces, we can change rules, we can do all sorts of things. Then now, like that's a lot of complexity that could be very difficult for us to be able to understand. And so, another thing too that I would think about is just the speed at which business operates, especially on the security side. think about the volume of vulnerabilities and threat data that just comes out, right? Every vendor, it seems, has their own threat intelligence feed. That was something as a CISO, I'd have people come and they would try to upsell me in this sort of McDonald's, do you want fries with that way? Hey, we also have a threat intel feed that we could add on. It's a separate SKU. And if you've got 20 products, or average security team probably has somewhere between 40 and 60 different tools. If we just sort of have that, and we went in the middle somewhere and we said 30 of those things that we have a threat intelligence feed. Well, that is crazy. And our signal to noise ratio could get really bad there, right? There could be a whole lot of noise that is camouflaging the important stuff that we may miss. And if you think again about speed, that just the way organizations operate is that there was a time when you could let a new person in your organization sort of limp along and kind of grow into and be able to sort of grow into their role, right? But you don't have 6 months anymore for that level 1 analyst to really learn and go. What you need is to turn that level 1 analyst loose and get them going. If they're in the SOC, they're answering calls or they're responding to alerts, whatever it is, that person needs to be functional as quickly as possible. And the point of you having those level 1s, right, is to clear up the level 2 resources and the level 3 and sort of anyone beyond, we'll say level N, wherever they need to go. If there's more than 3 levels there, you're trying to, winnow down or funnel the number of events or occurrences or alerts or whatever it is that we need to triage, as many of those as possible that can be reviewed by a level 1 accurately, the better you are, because then your more senior resources that are those guys tend to be guys, gals, whomever, tend to be tied up in projects and that sort of thing. And so it's really important. And so would our analysts know this full architecture? You can't see me with my cursor, but would they know that full architecture on the right side in that chart? Would they be equipped to respond if they got an alert and it said, this Dynamo database is got some weird things happening to it? Would they know that, that's where we keep the secret missile codes? Would they know that? And so let's think about this too, is that on the kind of the next extension of that is, if they don't know, then do they just become an escalator, right? Like they get the call and now they're just escalating, right? So instead of empowering them to be able to sort of disperse the load across the weight of many people's shoulders, all we're doing is we're having a human perform a function that we could do with some sort of programmatic approach. Because if we're just going to escalate to the senior people, we could just have an alert get fired and then have that go to a ticketing system or to your on-call method, whatever it is. I don't think anybody still uses a pager necessarily, but if you did, I guess you could do that, or it would, text you or call your phone or whatever. But lots of ways there. And so if we're going to have our SOC just be the escalator, well then, I would argue there's a different way to do that. I think if we think of our SOC analysts, like we're not really growing those people, they probably don't have a lot of job satisfaction, and your organization isn't getting better. And so instead of being this like filter that is getting rid of the things that don't matter and that are less imperative, or perhaps a better way to say it is more trivial, then we've made them this bottleneck, right? And so at Stream, our goal is to try to help to empower your SOC team so that your level 1 people have better visibility and then have tools to be able to get into action as quickly as possible, and to be able then to make good decisions and choices as quickly as possible that are going to be the right decisions and choices that are going to be helping to do remediation actions if those are necessary. And we have that, right? And so, we're trying to get pre-baked responses that are there with run books. We're trying to provide you with methods to be able to very quickly have some sort of if this then else kind of logic take place, that now we can guide that activity. And so if your SOC is just escalating tickets, they get a call and then they open a ticket and they forward it on. Well, I'm not sure that's a whole lot of value. And that in some ways feels like the security version of screwing the tube on the tube of toothpaste on an assembly line, right? Like that sounds pretty rough. And so one of the things that we think really helps to grow your SOC and to empower them, though, is to provide what we like to think of as cloud context. And so, there's a lot of elements to that. And as part of those elements, one of the things that in my career I have sort of thought of as a concept. I didn't make this concept up, but it's something that I really kind of internalized and then sort of pushed to all of my teams. And it came from a Department of Energy cybersecurity and maturity model called, I know this is going to sound crazy, the C2M2, the cybersecurity maturity model. And so that is the term I'm thinking of here is called the common operating picture, which would talk about the idea that essentially all teams get the same truth all at the same time. And now everybody can see all the information instead of it being siloed where the network team says the network information is only, that's networks, that belongs to network. And the identity team is like, no, identity data, that's the identity teams. And in threat intel, well, that's only the SOC or the sort of security operations team. And exploitability, well, I don't know, man, that's the red team's function, not really you guys. And containers, well, that's infrastructure. Instead of that, right, so we get all of the data and we give it to everybody who may need to see it in order to gain context. And the idea is that if we're sharing that data, then you and I might be in different roles within an organization, but based on our role, we could see the same data and make different decisions and choices that are part of our day-to-day job. And because of that, we'd be able to respond faster and we'd have better information. I've done lots of security incident response in my career, and I have been in scenarios where we had to go get 4 or 5 different teams together, and we're trying to cobble together data across multiple different sources from multiple different tools. And you've got CSV files that you've exported, and now you're writing scripts to be able to compile those so you can compare this timestamp with this IP address, and then take that off of one log source, and then take the same timestamp and an identity and associate it with that IP address, which came from maybe those are 2 different documents. And now I've got 3 different sources of data. I'm trying to match together to be able to say at 2:23 p.m. Central Time on the 16th of April, Jason.nations was 10.1.1.1, and then he did whatever he did. And so now we that's a really tough thing. And if you're having to cobble that together, it's really difficult. And the idea too with cloud, right, is that you don't want to allow dwell time for internet facing applications for malicious actors. So you'd want to get on this very quickly. So if we have a common operating picture, we put all this together, we don't have the exercise where we're trying to get all of those data sources and mash them together manually or in an ad hoc fashion. At Stream, we can consume all of your cloud logs and all of your data, put them all together into one interface, and we can take data from multiple cloud providers, so AWS, GCP, Azure, and then we can take that data, put it all together, normalize it so it all looks the same, even though you're really talking about potentially 3 different sets of jargon and maybe 3 different distinct languages, just depends. But now we have, if we think of our SOC as a single room, well, now we have a single tool. We don't have the sort of swivel your chair and talk to your neighbor kind of investigations, because we don't have to cobble that data together from a siloed perspective. And now we're just able to go start to see this is what happened and here's how we're going to respond, which then makes our ability to triage much better, much better, right? Because and one of the things with Stream, with the tool set that we provide you, is with all of that data, we can figure out, well, okay, so what are the attack vectors? And then as a result of that, well, what type of exploitability exists? Is there a blast radius, right? Like when you're doing an investigation, the questions you always get is, well, what else did they touch, right? So that blast radius. And then did they get to what we think of as our crown jewels? Do we know what other entitlements may be compromised that we may have to go look at? And there's lots of stuff there. And so that's the kind of thing that you want to be able to provide that context to enable your SOC to be able to execute. And that's really important from a tactical perspective. But there's also, and I would say this too, is that there's also a more strategic thing that you've got to do as well, which part of having, I'm going to come back to my slide for a moment. I think I can just get to here. I'm just going to bounce back to it this way. If we think about this picture being our architecture, and we want to know what the architecture is, but more than that, we want to understand what are the business processes and business implications to that. And so if we think about another thing that's going to make us very effective is thinking about being security professionals, but with a business focus, right? And so, in 1961, in a speech before Congress, a joint session of Congress, John F. Kennedy enunciated the goal for the first time of sending a man to the moon by the end of the decade, right? It's 1961. He's like, before the end of 1969, we're gonna put somebody on the moon, and we're sending someone to the moon, I guess, and then bring him home safely. And then, as the story goes, in his first visit to NASA in 1962, he stopped to speak to a janitor at NASA. And JFK asked the man what he did for NASA, and the janitor replied, I'm helping put a man on the moon. And the idea here is that whatever our role is within the organization, we still exist to support the goals of the organization. If we're not thinking about that, then we may be missing something. But having that context enables us to go, well, these are the real deal crown jewels, and if someone is compromising this, then it could create a problem. And that could hurt our ability to function as a business. And so I don't know if that was a PR ploy, if it was a real deal thing, or just this sort of urban legend anecdote about JFK asking the janitor. But I do agree with the idea that we would have some sort of missional alignment across the organization. I think NASA did it fabulously during the Apollo missions. And I would say that the good and mature security organizations are doing the same kind of thing. I came from, as I said, electric utility. Well, everybody in my team, what we tried to focus on from a leadership perspective, making sure everyone understood that their job wasn't to be in the SOC and to exist to be bothered by phone calls that rang that took them away from watching reruns of The Office on the other TV in the monitoring center. They exist to be able to support the company's ability to generate and transmit and distribute electricity. And so if we foster that kind of mission alignment across our organization, then we can prioritize our response based on those business impacts to our critical operations. And then if you think about that too, we can even understand what our risk tolerances are on that, so that we're really focusing on the things that matter. And that if we're looking at this in real time and we're thinking about how we're going to make our SOC better, there are lots of tools in the space. And I'm not the guy that's going to come and badmouth another tool. I think there's some great tools out there in cloud. But what we've done historically, or maybe historically is the wrong way to say that, because cloud is so new still, even though it's not brand new, but it's still, comparatively speaking, with technology, it's on the newish side. We've looked a lot at posture management. And so lots of acronyms. But if we think about posture management, well, posture management tells me, well, how is my environment configured? But it doesn't necessarily tell me what's going on in the environment. And one of the types of lines of questions that I always hated as a CISO, and I still kind of hate them, is the are we secure line of questioning. It's really difficult if you don't know to be able to answer that. And so it's possible you could be getting out over your skis and in the proverbial Top Gun, your body's making, or maybe in this case, it's your mouth is writing checks that your body can't cash. And so you want to be careful there. But if we can have great visibility and we've got the full cloud context, and we have enabled our team to be missional and to be focused on that mission and to understand what the implications of that mission are and how that lines up with our architecture and the way that our environment works, they'll be better able to respond and function. So if we go, then I guess maybe the next step is I would ask you perhaps rhetorically, I guess, is, are you cloud ready? And maybe this is something you need to think about in the context of your organization. Are you cloud ready? And so if we think through that, there's probably a little more to just like, well, I mean, I don't know if I'm cloud ready. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. So maybe let's go this way, and I'll ask maybe some more specific questions. Does your SOC have the tools and ability to answer these 4 questions in less than 60 seconds, right? An identity's compromised, what's the blast radius? You have a suspicious IP that's been detected in your cloud. Has data been leaked? What's the business impact of quarantining a particular asset? And it could be, and we can adjust these if we were going to, instead of quarantine, maybe we power something up and down. That's kind of historically what we've done. And with a virtual machine or a container that might be misbehaving, right, as we we'll reprovision the asset, or we'll blow it away and then relaunch it, that sort of thing. Fourth question here is: an alert was triggered from an IP address. Well, what resource was associated with those IP addresses during this period of time that it seemed abnormal? These are all very hard questions sometimes, but they're very important because you want to understand what's the implication of what's happened, right? Is my data spilled? If so, how much? And where did it go? And how do I know that that's the limit of what's happened? And so those are all things that we've got to be able to answer, right? And so I would think about it, it's important that your SOC knows the answers, and then also important that they understand why the answers are what they are. And when we think about getting these answers, I want you to go back for a second, and perhaps this is circular to say, understand why the answer is the answer, and that's okay. But think of it this way. Do you remember third grade math class? Right. And for those of you who thought there would be no math in this webinar, you're safe. We're just talking a concept. I'm not going to throw problems at you. But in third grade math, when you had the math test, it wasn't enough for you to know that 3 times 3 is 9. Maybe, and that's a terrible example because that's so easy. Maybe that would have been okay. But on a math test that you had to do in writing, you had to always show your work on the math test, right? If you were going to add up 462 and 536, then you had to show how you got to that number, because it was more important for you to know how to solve the problem than it was necessarily for you to have the right answer in your growth as a third grader and your understanding of math. Right? So it wasn't enough just to have the answer. It was important that you knew how to solve the problem. And so if we have to answer these 4 questions that are on that slide, it's important for us to know why they matter and how do we answer that. And that if our answer is, here's the blast radius, well, how do I know that? Because you've got to establish an incident response. Very much what you're having to do, if you've ever been through this, you know, is you're establishing a fact pattern. This is the fact pattern that you're going to turn over to your legal team, to law enforcement, potentially, who knows, but you're going to have a fact pattern. You may have called it something different perhaps, but the legal term of art there would be the fact pattern. That's what you would take to court if you were prosecuting somebody. It's what you would rely upon if you were having a dispute with another business partner, if they were the reason that you were implicated in a breach somehow or another, or even if you were having to argue with your insurance provider to be able to recover, you would have to have this fact pattern. And we can think of Joe Friday saying just the facts. That's exactly what we have here. And so got to know the fact pattern, got to be able to answer this type of question very quickly to be really effective in your SOC, to not have escalations, to not allow dwell time. And so when we think of that, so that term is cloud detection and response, right? I can detect what's going on within my cloud environment, and I can have a response. And so our definition, because that's something that we've gotten asked, is because, again, we're making up our own acronym. I don't know that we necessarily made this one up, but this is someone could argue that the industry has made this up. So our definition, right, and I'll just read this off, which I guess I'm breaking cardinal rules of presentations by reading from a slide, but that's okay. Real-time visibility and actual insights to detect, investigate, and respond to threats across every layer of your cloud environment. When we say CDR, that's what we mean, right? And so that's really important. You've got to have real-time visibility. You have to have insights that you can action on. It won't be enough if our alert just said, hey, there's a problem. Great. Now you are potentially looking for a needle in a stack of needles. You need to be able to investigate then. So we now hear that there's a problem. Well, then how do I dig in deeper? And then the next step of that would be able to say, all right, so I know there's a problem. Here's how I've dug in. And here's how I would respond across to figure out what that is. And here's my response could be, here's how I'm going to respond to make sure that we don't have a negative impact on the organization, that we don't bring a business function down, that we don't create a denial of service within our environment on ourselves. And so that's really important. And that's at Stream, that's what we really strive to provide. And that's sort of in the evangelistic role that I have in our organization. That's really what we strive for. And so let me show you a different graph to kind of help you see what that looks like a little bit. And so again, this perhaps could be an eye chart, but let me just help you. So at Stream, we have what we like to call our cloud twin, which is really just a representation of that architecture that I showed you previously to help you to see, like, this is your environment. These are the assets. Here are the controls that you may have within that. and here's how they're all arranged and how they are integrated and how they communicate with one another. And sort of the big silos of that, right, is that you of course have cloud logs, but you may also have within what we kind of refer to as an exploitability feed, you may have a vulnerability management product that could give you context to help you know that the MS-1710 patch has not been applied to this Windows environment. Does anybody, maybe if you can put in the chat real fast, anybody know what MS-1710 is? Give you just a sec to answer that because you may be typing furiously. Don't Google it. I'll give you 1, 2, 3. All right, MS-1710 is the Microsoft, the series of Microsoft patches, because it's not just one patch. That was for the NotPetya ransomware attack that happened in about May of 2017. And if you know, if you're part of that, I'm probably bringing back some bad memories and making you break out into a cold sweat. It was really bad for a lot of organizations. And we could do whole webinars on the incident response on that. And that created some really crazy stuff because it sort of came out of the Russian sphere of influence, and insurance companies had to figure out how to treat that, the implications of that, and that there were a bunch of big legal cases and things going on that occurred with that. So for us, having those exploitability feeds are really important. They're very valuable for us, but it's not the full context. If we only have that, I'd argue like you probably don't need a list of more stuff to patch within your environment, but you may need to know what patches exist or don't exist or configuration settings, because that could help you to know if this is how critical it really is. Maybe we say it that way. That's how you could sort of t-shirt size that or stack rank it or red, yellow, green, whatever you want to do. Another one of the sort of contextual feeds there would be your sort of sensitive data context. And so if we think about tools like Sierra or others that help you pinpoint your crown jewels or your sensitive data that you got to make sure you protect. Well, that's really helpful because if we can see there's an attack path that walks you from one thing to another, and they're 3 steps away from your crown jewels, or they're 20 steps away from your crown jewels, that's going to matter, and your response is going to matter. And so then we can think about threat intelligence sources. We can think about what's our perimeter and telling us there, right? So we might have different logs from other sources that are helping us have information there. Lots of different things coming, right? And then for us, right, so we're going to give, like, we've got cloud logs, we've got the exploitability feed, we've got the things coming from your firewall, if you have a WAF, and then if you have other workload related data in your cloud environments that you might have, if you've got Sneak or you've got something else there, we would pile all that data together to be able to have the full site picture, to be able to say, okay, here is really and truly what's going on across my containers, across my other parts of my serverless architecture. Here are the Lambda functions in my AWS that have fired, that sort of thing. And now you really have a sense of what's going on. And if we think about on the client server side, or maybe I'm sorry, I said that wrong. On the legacy side with client server environments, we've had this sort of telemetry of what's going on an endpoint, what's the user on the endpoint touching, what applications on the endpoint are being invoked, and what applications then are being invoked by those applications. We've had that type of information for legacy client server and user endpoints for years, like over 10 years that we've had that sort of data, but we don't have that type of information in the cloud until now. And so you've got this, and then now you might be able to take this, and if you, as part of your response, you would feed this out to, okay, here's how we're going to message this out. Here are the ways that we're going to hold on to that data to keep our fact pattern if we're going to forward that data to our SIM or to our SOAR platform. And then there could be other things that we might have that would help us to respond to this, or that we may need to change. We could do a lot of different things by having all of this context and being able to see all of this. And so we might even be able to be, I know this is gonna be crazy, proactive instead of reactive, because we'll be able to know. And for us, the thing that we call that cloud twin has a bunch of this information. And instead of you having to cobble together multiple different disparate data sources, we've got it all in one interface to help you to be able to see that very quickly. And then to be able to respond to it and be able to do some great stuff. And so this is part of it. and that we're not doing a full like deep dive into the demo environment of our product today, but we certainly could do that for you. I'm gonna pop another slide, and we're kind of getting to a time where I want to stop talking a little, and I want to allow people to ask some questions. But if you'd like to learn more about how we do it, I would love to show you and have you do that. And I guess what I would say too is that don't trust me because I'm this fast talking sales guy, because that's not me. I'm a former customer who believes really strongly in this and think that it helps really solve a problem, because everybody has cloud and everybody has difficulty in being able to see everything that's going on in their cloud. If you think too about the disparity between the technology stacks with Microsoft and Amazon and Google, well, how many interfaces, different interfaces, can any one analyst actually be able to consume and to master? That's a challenge. And so that in and of itself could be a problem. We help you to level your analysts up, because we're able to help you to see those things, and to we just sort of obviate the need for some of that. We can kind of get the easy button as much as possible. Maybe don't call it the easy button, that's bad. We'll call it the less hard button. So I'm going to stop there, and happy to take some questions. We have one that Ahmed has put in. So when and if a major cloud provider itself has a security incident, how do we show? So that's a great question. That's perhaps a little bit more than the scope of what I'd have. And if there was telemetry that was affecting your environment within that cloud provider, so if you were within AWS and something was occurring that came through, we would be able to tell you that this identity is accessing this asset, and here are the changes that it just made. And again, you want that in real time. If you're dependent upon a scan that's a point in time, this is a thing that I think about quite a bit, right? Is that if you're basing how you're telling your story about are we secure or not, as I said in that terrible line of questioning that I always hated, not necessarily it's a bad question, it's just hard to answer. You want to be real time and not point in time, because what could happen, especially in your cloud environment, is that my scan runs, the scan's done, not going to be another scan for another 12 hours. Well, so in that 12-hour period, someone comes in and they very likely harmlessly makes a change that says, how about we just make it, we're going to open up, we're going to take this virtual network interface and we're going to open it up to the internet on port 22, any. So take the port out of it. We'll just do any. And so any IP address can go to any IP address that can pass through this network interface. And the developer was the guy doing that off the DevSecOps team, and he was doing it because he was just trying to make his application function. And he had the rights to do it because that's the way your provisioning and role-based access controls are. And so he does that, and he makes that change, and he's like, it's working. And he then figures something else out. And then 3 hours later, he turns that off because he figures out that he just forgot to instantiate something within his code. Well, that was there for 3 hours. How long? Maybe that's not enough time for anybody to do anything bad. Maybe not. I don't know. But it's possible someone could have. But if they revert the change within 3 hours, your next scan hasn't run, and your posture management solution is never going to see that change. So something crazy could have occurred, and you'll never see it. If there is a change made in your cloud environment, we will see it and we will action on it. And we can filter and adjust on that you get to set your own rules with our solution. We'll provide you with a bunch, but then you can configure those based on your use cases and your business requirements and your crown jewels. And so you'll be able to see those and be able to have better context. And what I'll tell you is if there's an Azure or AWS issue that gets to the client layer, then we would likely be able to see it. If there's something that's like DDoSing some piece of Amazon that we can't see, but it's affecting something, we might not be able to. I don't know that we've got telemetry on that, so we may not be able to help do much there. So I'm happy to take any other questions that anyone might have. I think it's a great question, and it is an issue, but
Indeed.
But I hope I answered it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. Just a fantastic presentation. One of the things that really stuck out to me, and then we'll get to the questions, was slide 10, where you asked those 4 questions. Can your SOC answer this? I think that was sobering for so many people, because going through it, I bet a lot of our attendees that are like, Nope. 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 So these are the kinds of questions though that you need to be asking, because this is during an attack, when you're in that crisis mode, this is what you need to know. So it's good to ask the questions, even if they're uncomfortable. Hey, I did want to mention, can you tell us what the QR code that's up there on the slide now is about?
Yeah, and so if you wanna schedule a demo with us, then you can hit this QR code. This QR code actually is going to take you to a landing page. We're going to be at RSA that's coming up in just a couple of weeks. If you're going to be at RSA, we have a booth there in the North Pavilion, which is our booth number is. I mean, the truth is, I don't know if anybody looks for numbers. You may, if you're mapping out your day there, but our number is 6476. You'll see Stream.Security signage and other things there. But come by our booth if you want to set up an actual demo while you're there. We'll have a pretty good sized team, about 13 people, that'll be just at RSA just for this sort of thing. I'll be there myself. We've got some meeting rooms. We can do some demos. We can do a demo on the floor. We can show you more deep dive of what's happening there.
Awesome. RSA is always such a fun show. I've been there a number of times, always enjoyed it. So going to be another great show this year. Okay, let's dive into some more questions then. We've got a little bit more time left. Here's a good one. What are the risks of relying on delayed telemetry during a cloud incident?
Yeah, so I think I guess maybe I might have stolen my own thunder in answering that, right? Again, if a change occurs and it takes you 12 hours to see it, how effective is your response going to be? And honestly, we could probably go back and even think about why a lot of security professionals have jobs. So go back, little over maybe close to 15 years now, maybe 16. But Target was compromised. Not a knock on Target. It happens to, it's an inevitability if you've got stuff. Well, Target had all of these messages that were coming into their tool. I won't name names, but they had it coming into their tool, alerting their security operations and monitoring folks. And they got so many messages that they eventually just turned them off. But what that was, it was that a malicious actor had compromised them through a third-party system in their coolers that were allowing, it's where your frozen foods were. Like that was the network that they were coming in and penetrated them from. And they had the notifications, but they didn't get them, or they didn't do anything with them. If you get some data, but it's old, especially with the dynamic nature of cloud, today badguy.com, tomorrow the same IP address is, or maybe the same URL is really girlscouts.com. Like you don't want to take that information for granted, and you need to be able to respond quickly. And you want to reduce your dwell time. I think if we look at the Verizon report or others that are sources, that kind of help us as an industry sort of benchmark what we're seeing, is that the amount of dwell time, which is the time that a malicious actor has compromised an environment before they're detected, it doesn't take as much time to be able to exfiltrate data or to have a long-lasting impact as it used to, right? Years and years ago, it would be potentially months, and then it got to days and weeks, and now it's hours or minutes that crazy stuff can happen, and that your data can be gone in a heartbeat. And some of that's a function of how we operate now to make things more simple, and some of it is a function of complexity. And I get it. And if we made an application that was in a server room that had no walls and no windows and no doors, then you'd have a box in a room with no way to get anything out of it or no way to put anything into it, and it would be worthless. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so we've got a question kind of related to what you were talking about with the Target breach, which most of us probably at least remember to one degree or another. And I mean, alert fatigue is real. Yeah. It is a real thing, and it still affects admins and SOCs to this day. So here's a good question about that. How does Stream prioritize alerts based on exploitability and business impact?
Absolutely. So kind of talked about that a little bit, but if we have that cloud context where we can see, here's where if we think about it in a logical way, that there were six different controls, sort of in a line from left to right or right to left, whichever way you want to think about it. And something is close to what we've defined, like all on this end is the user access point. and on this end is the crown jewel data. If we've got 20 steps in there, we've got 100 steps in there that someone would have to traverse in order to get to that data. If it's 100 steps, well, that's going to be a lot tougher for that malicious actor to get to instead of 2 steps. And so, or if the database itself was directly accessible from the internet, and it was responding to queries directly from the internet and not from from a different data source that has a different set of controls. Well, that's going to be a lot harder. And so what I would say there, right, is that we have to remember that not all assets are created equally, and not all critical assets are created equally. And that because of that context, we can know, well, here's the stuff that we would literally like hit the alarm and everybody's got to wake up no matter what it is, and we're canceling Christmas, and this is what we got to do. We got to solve it. And then the thing that's, there's a significantly larger sort of technical burden and control burden to be able to access the critical data or the crown jewel data. Well, then we have a little bit more time, a different type of urgency. I don't know if we have less, but we just have a different type of urgency because we've got more controls in place. And so instead of us trying to tell you, and I love the idea of the SOC, we think about too, if your SOC analyst is calling and telling you, hey, there's somebody that's doing something, and this is a terrible analogy, but just go with it. But they're 150 steps away from being able to touch anything. Then they're waking somebody up in the middle of the night for that. Maybe that's worth it, but maybe not. Maybe what you'd want to know, if like, hey, something's going on with your box and it's only 2 steps away. Like there's 2 layers between you and your asset and the database where we keep the secret code to the new iPad. And like that's going to be the great new whiz bang thing that we're going to take over the world with. Well, you would want to respond to that differently, and so like that would be a wake them up out of bed kind of thing, something where it just allows for urgency and allows you to have some understanding of what your business criticality is, right? If we know we're going to harm something that's going to make the business go out of business, well, then we're going to respond to that differently, and that's the kind of stuff that we would work with you to try to create that additional context and those additional business rules to say like, this is really like the P1 or SEV1 or whatever you want to call that type of ticket or issue or incident that we want to work through. And this one over here is a P5, which is like off the scale because anything after like a P3 doesn't get worked. And so we would want to be able to say like, let's focus on the things that are really, really important. And Keith, I can see too in a comment that we've got another, Ahmed, you're going to get a gold star for asking questions. So post-breach cloud forensics are hard. What's the first log or data set you preserve? I got to read some more. It looks like it's got a little longer. In crisis situations that most teams tend to overlook until it's too late. I think that's a great question. Here's what I would tell you is that at Stream, we're going to grab all of the data sources from the cloud logs, and we're not going to be altering them. And that as long as you've got data, we're probably really generally looking at about 30 days in normal scenarios, but we can adjust that and increase the depth, right? If we knew we have 30 days worth of logs, but we think something happened 90 days ago, and the bucket has 400 days worth of logs, we could just adjust the breadth and depth of what we're looking for to help to go get that information. But like the truth is that I would say that you want to try not to override any logs. If possible, you want to have as much data as you can, and that every security person, if they were given the option, would never get rid of any piece of data ever. You would have every log, but there's a cost to that. And so I think you should be shooting for trying to keep at least 120 days if possible of your log data, if not more. And it just depends on what your organization is able to do and how chatty the applications and systems you're using, and that's going to be based on the number of assets and the types of assets and the number of hops and other controls that you might have in place.
Okay. Hey, we are up against time right now, Jason, but thank you so much for that presentation, for the insights in the Q&A. It was so much fun. Now, we're going to leave that QR code up in the meantime for people, to track that down and hopefully meet you out at RSA. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you. Thanks for letting us also know how Stream.Security can keep us safer in the cloud.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Thanks for participating today, everybody. Take care.
Absolutely. Have a great day. And with that, folks, We are getting to the end of our event, but we do have one favorite ask of everyone. Riley is about to open up a quick survey that we'd appreciate if you could all fill out. This is a short survey for those of us here on the Smart Brief team. We just want to know how we're doing. How can we make these sessions better for you? Tell us what we're doing well. Tell us what we're not doing so well. All this feedback is super valuable for us. So that survey should probably be up right now, and it is. So you can see that right there. And while you're filling that out, I'm just going to go over a few of the handouts that Stream has got over in that doc section. We talked about that a little bit before. So what we have got there, I'm going to go over those while you're filling out our little survey there. So one of the things we've got is an overview from Stream on cloud detection and response, the CDR that we were talking about today and its importance in the current era. We also have a review of how Stream.Security improves your SIM with real-time cloud context and better SIM alerts. We also talked about that a good bit on the event today. In those docs, you will also find a look at how Stream makes you more secure by enhancing your endpoint detection and response, also known as EDR. Now, that includes an attack scenario and how the bad guys might get in. So that's really valuable to get in kind of the mindset of an attacker and see how they might be going after your systems. And finally, the last resource you'll find there is a high-level overview of Stream benefits, as well as how it levels up your detection and response game, along with some striking statistics from real-world customers. That kind of feedback is always so valuable because it's not just what they're telling you, it's what folks out there using it are experiencing. So that is extremely valuable information. So much great stuff in the docs from Stream for you today. It is all free. Make sure to get all of that now. And thanks for filling out the survey. I'm going to ask Riley to close that down now for us all. And we are going to move into the final bit that I've got to do with you today. And that is one of my favorite parts. And that is giving away the $250 Amazon gift card that I mentioned up top. Now, remember, you do have to be around for the entire event to be eligible to win the prize. And we do have a winner today. And the winner of that $250 is Maggie Tremmel from Wisconsin. So congrats to you, Maggie, and sit tight because we will be in touch ASAP about claiming your prize. And with that, folks, on behalf of the Smart Brief team, I want to thank Stream.Security for making this event possible, and a giant thank you to Jason for a fantastic presentation and a super interesting chat. I learned a ton today about cloud security, and that's one of the reasons I love doing these. I think all of us learned a lot today, and I think there's a great deal of interest generated for Stream.Security and what they can do. So remember to check out those docs and catch up with them at RSA. You might, in fact, see Jason there in the booth. So if you do, make sure you remind him about the event today and how much you enjoyed it. So with that, folks, I'm going to be signing off here. Can't wait to see everyone in the next event. But until then, have a great rest of your day.